Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on your time zone. Thank you so much for joining our policy webinar today. Last month, at a landmark summit that was held in Johannesburg, 4 countries in the MENA region, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran, were invited to join the BRICS group as of January next year, together with Ethiopia and Argentina. If all the invitations are accepted, BRICS will represent 42% of the world's population and around 1/3 of global GDP. The BRICS group, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, was formed in 2010 when South Africa joined the bloc, and it was initially established to offer some sort of a counterbalance to Western institutions and to foster a multipolar world in which the global South plays a more central role. So why did these countries seek BRICS membership? What unique interests can they contribute to the BRICS group? And why did the BRICS group choose to expand anyways? What are the larger economic, regional, and geopolitical implications of the expansion of this coalition? To address these questions and others, we're very happy to have with us today Alexandre Kateb and Abdallah Baboud. Alexandre Kateb is an economist and a chartered financial analyst. He is the founder and chairman of the Multipolarity Report, which he founded after 20 years of experience as an economist, a policy advisor, and investment strategist. And Abdallah Baboud is a non-resident scholar at the Carnegie Middle East Center and is currently a visiting professor at the Faculty of International Research and Education at Waseda University in Tokyo. And I am Nur Arafeh. I'm a fellow at the Carnegie Middle East Center, and I work on the political economy of the Middle East and North Africa, and I will be moderating today's webinar. So I will start by asking questions to Alexandre and Abdallah, and we will then have Q&A with the audience. So please, if you have any questions, add them to the comment section in the chat bar. So let's start by addressing the question of interests and motivations. And I'd like to start with you, Alexandre. Why did the BRICS group choose to expand? And why were these 6 countries selected? Like, what are the considerations that guided the selection of these 6 countries? And what interests do these countries bring to the BRICS group?
Thank you very much, Nur. Thank you to the Carnegie Middle East Center for having me on this webinar. Well, actually, the question is very interesting. I don't think we have all the answers because the selection process has been done behind closed door, but we can nevertheless see that there is some logic and some rationale behind the selection of these 6 countries. Among the more than 20 countries that presented their candidacy or expressed their interest for joining the grouping. So if we take the 6 countries, the first thing I think that stands out is that you have these 2 large oil producers, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And you have another Middle Eastern country, which is across Africa and the Middle East, which is Egypt, obviously. So there is some rationale in bringing, especially the oil exporters from the GCC into this alliance, as it was a long-sought goal from some countries in the BRICS, especially China, but also India, to consolidate their relationship with these countries, which are important exporters of oil and gas to these both to Asian energy consumers, and to develop a stronger relationships when it comes to business, investing, and so on in these sectors, but also beyond these sectors. And maybe we will talk about that later. But the idea is to use actually the flows and the capital flows generated from the oil trade to finance other investments in Asia and in other countries as well, actually among all the new BRICS plus countries. So this is basically for me the rationale behind choosing these two countries, especially that come with so-called deep pockets, meaning they have capital to export. And then they can use this capital to invest in the other members of the grouping, much like was done with the petrodollar at that time, in the 1970s. But this time around, it is more likely to use the Chinese yuan alongside a few other currencies, but mostly this is what would be the so-called petro yuan trade for me. Now, if we look at the other countries, but I will let also Abdullah develop these ideas. I think maybe he has a specific point of view on that. As for Egypt, I think it is very much, also in the same vein to include another strategically important Middle Eastern country for both China, India, and the other BRICS. Because, as you know, BRICS, Egypt hosts the Suez canal, and this is a very critical infrastructure for regional and for global trades, and it's also a very important milestone on the Belt and Road, initiative project. It's a very important component of this Belt and Road strategy, as is Ethiopia, by the way, which is the most important country in Eastern Africa, demographically speaking, and it has been growing very fast, and it has a very good potential, actually, to become the most important economy in Eastern Africa going forward. And it's also one critical country when it comes to the flows from Asia to Africa and Europe and the Middle East. And it is a neighbor to Djibouti, for example, which has a very important port, and use it as a port for financing trade with other countries in the region, and basically it's a success story of the Belt and Road Initiative. When we speak of investments, for example, in manufacturing and so on. When it comes to the other countries, we basically we are speaking of Argentina, for example, which is probably an addition brought by Brazil to consolidate the weight of South Africa in this grouping, and then we have the remaining countries, so to say. We can see that there is also a rationale in bringing those other countries, but I will let maybe Abdullah also develop this point.
Thank you so much, Alexandre, for highlighting the different economic, strategic considerations that guided the selection of these countries. Abdullah, I'd like to turn to you and actually ask you, from the perspective of countries, the countries themselves, why did they want to join? What are their motivations and strategic goals? And let's focus here on the MENA countries specifically. what were they seeking from their membership in the BRICS Plus Alliance?
Thank you, Nur, for that question. And if you allow me, I want to thank you for organizing this important event. And it's a great pleasure to be invited to speak here with Alexander, who has very kindly covered the motivation for expanding the bloc and the choice of these particular countries. As you correctly said in the introduction, there were a number of countries that have actually applied, but the BRICS summit only decided to include 6 for the time being. Obviously, this is it's a process that could increase the number in the future, and I'm sure there are many countries who want to join. To turn to your question, why these countries want to join, obviously, as you correctly said, also in the introduction, it's the value of and the level of economic activity of the BRICS countries, BRICS Plus, that encourage these countries to join this organization. We have to take into consideration that the primary purpose for the bloc was actually to create an alternative to US Western-led alliances or Western-led management of the global system, which many countries in the global South feel that this is not necessarily does not necessarily do justice to them. And there is kind of a manipulation in the political and economic power by the advanced economies, whether it is in freedom of trade, whether it is in the finance or politics, etc. There are voices in the global South that feel that they need to get more room to integrate into the world economy, and that the existing political and economic structure is not necessarily conducive to that, and there is a bit of injustice in it. So this group initially was created for this, but as you also correctly said, this group is now a very important group. It has about something like 40+% of the world population, again around 36 or so percent of its GDP, about 16% of global trade. It's an important group, and as these countries started to find the space for them, first of all, within the global system, to be able to work and interact. And as these countries also try to diversify their economies away from, being based on hydrocarbon or productive industries to more technology and know-how and trade and investment, they feel that this group offers them another opportunity. It's not necessarily that they are leaving other groups or trying to make enemies in other groups. It's just they are trying to expand and navigate through this very complex global system that currently exists. So the group offers them that. Also, the group itself is, offers some geopolitical benefits for these countries, because just to think about energy, just to take energy as an example, much of the oil and gas that is produced in the Middle East is actually now diverted not to Europe and not to the United States, but more to Asia, to China, to India. And they are the 2 largest consuming countries for energy. Russia is a very important partner in OPEC for the oil-producing countries. Also, access to technology, technology and know-how. Obviously, the West has an advanced economy, but the West has been reluctant in parting away with some of this know-how and technology for political reasons, for other geopolitical considerations. and whatever comes from the West is being considered as carrying a lot of weight and conditions with that. While probably, working with the BRICS countries doesn't carry that weight, and it's easy to deal with. So it's a voice of the global South trying to echo it in the global system to say that we want to be part of this world, we want to have justice, we want to be involved, and these are emerging markets, China, India in particular, are emerging markets, so is Brazil and South Africa. So they find that there are going to be much more economic benefits for trade, for investment, and also it offers them, as I mentioned, a wider geopolitical maneuver that they can play politics in the international system. So from that perspective, it looks very beneficial for these countries to join. And I don't think there is there is nothing that stops any country joining any particular group as such. Obviously, each country has its own particular or peculiar reason. For example, Iran wants to come out of the isolation that it's been imposed and the sanctions that Europe and the United States has imposed on it because of the nuclear issue and the JCPOA. For the United Arab Emirates, it's a country that wants to widen and deepen its engagement in the global economy. So is Egypt, and of course Ethiopia, and so on. And they all offer, as Alexander had mentioned, lots of different benefits. And I think this is why they were chosen in the first place, these 6 countries, because they do complement the BRICS, as it were, and add value to it. So I think it's a win-win situation from both sides' perspectives.
Exactly. You summed it up pretty well, I think, by saying that it's a win-win situation. So having discussed the question of motivations and interests, I'd like us now to think more about the global and regional implications of the expansion. And here, Alexandre, my question is, how do you think will the expansion shape global governance? And what are specifically the currency and monetary implications of the BRICS Plus alliance? Do you think it will be adding momentum to the de-dollarization drive that we have been witnessing recently?
Well, thank you, Nur. I will maybe answer the first question about governance and then move to the de-dollarization. I think when it comes to governance, generally speaking, the BRICS Plus are a very interesting addition to all the efforts that are being conducted to try to reform global governance. This has been going on for decades, actually, but it has gained momentum, especially since the great financial crisis in 2008, which led to the creation of the G20. And the BRICS were also some way a child of this crisis, and the BRICS grouping first met in 2009, just after the great financial crisis. And it was kind of the counterpart to the G7, or at the time it was the G8 with Russia, but Russia was suspended from the G8, if you remember, in 2008, following the war in Georgia. And then there was this BRICS grouping emerging, which actually included all the non-Western powers. And it was interesting because then within the G20, you could have this discussion, this dialogue between the G7 without Russia, because it was excluded from that, on one side, which was basically the West and its and its key allies like Japan. And on the other side, you had all these non-Western rising economies, and they had different worldviews and different interests, and they were especially more motivated to reform global governance, because the system that these countries find themselves trying to accommodate was no longer fit for their growing power and growing economic clout, and there had to be some changes made to the Bretton Woods system, for example, the IMF, World Bank, and the other organizations that were basically established after World War II by the United States and their allies. So obviously the situation had changed from 1945 to 2008. And then you have now this new momentum following a few years where actually BRICS were not seen as a priority, especially by countries like China, for example, which had to focus on its own internal domestic issues. But now there is this new momentum starting from this Johannesburg summit, and it is not a coincidence, because it comes just about 1 year and a half after the start of the war in Ukraine, which led to a further fragmentation of the global economy, with the imposition of sanctions on some countries like Russia, with the weaponization of the dollar and the Western-led financial system. And for all these reasons, there was a need to renew this momentum and to try to impulse new ideas, to come up with solutions that would benefit everyone, including the Western countries. I think this is the perspective in which and the background from which this summit came, and tried to bring this new momentum with the inclusion of these new members. So the idea is really to serve as a catalyst for the reform of global institutions and global governance. Because what is the alternative? The alternative is that you are going to create another system that would be competing with the Western system. It would be a kind of a Cold War situation, so to say, and nobody will win at the end from this situation. And I think everyone is aware of that. Then, when it comes to de-dollarization, it is obviously very related to the topic of governance, because it is the translation at the financial and monetary level of all this rebalancing. And here too it is interesting, because this topic, of de-dollarization has been around for decades. What is new is that China's increasing emergence and its weight, becoming the second largest economy in the world, and its weight in global trade and manufacturing, is something that is now inescapable. It's a game changer from previous eras in which this topic was discussed. And then, so you have to try to figure out how the system, how the monetary system is going to change to accommodate this new reality, especially that some countries now distrust the dollar, even though the dollar remains the dominant global reserve currency. But this weaponization and these sanctions, I think they have backfired, as the title of one book published recently, mentioned. This idea of sanction backfiring against the Western monetary system. But at the end of the day, I think the solution is not in developing a competing system or trying to replace the dollar. It is trying to complement the existing currencies with the emerging ones, and trying to move from a situation that doesn't fit the interest of anybody. Actually, even the United States, you might argue that they have a burden because they have to uphold this status of the global reserve currency into a situation that would be, more balanced, with a balanced burden sharing between different regional powers or regional groupings, in which you will have obviously the dollar, which will remain very strong, but you will also have the euro, you have the Chinese yuan, and around these three major currencies, you will have also the other currencies that will continue to play the roles. But basically, this is this kind of monetary multipolarity that I think this summit alluded to. And if there are no practical solutions yet, I think the discussion is going in this direction.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alexandre, for these insights. Moving on to the MENA region, Abdullah, what will the expansion mean for the MENA region? What will be specifically like the implications of the expansion on regional organizations like the Arab League or the Gulf Cooperation Council? Do you think the expansion will challenge these regional organizations, or will it actually enhance the role, and how? We can't hear you, Abdullah. You're still muted.
Sorry, yes. Thank you, Nur, for that important questions. And if you allow me just to add to what Alexandre had really explained well, was that we are now going through an era where we are seeing a slow demise of the post World War II international order. This is not going to happen very quickly, and we are seeing also a birth of a new international order that no one yet knows what shape or form is it going to have. And within this, we are seeing kind of a lot of maneuvers between global powers to see, how this, what the new international order is going to look like. And within that, if you like, I can just say, for the MENA countries, obviously, they see the benefit of obviously involving themselves and integrating themselves with the global economy. The MENA countries have, either geographically or because of their the nature of their economies, are one of the most open economies to world trade. They export energy, they export oil and gas and raw material, and they all import almost everything. And obviously, from their own perspective, they want to be part of this global economy and part of this global South as well. And they share some of the concerns that we have alluded to earlier, and especially what Alexandre also mentioned about the dollarization. If I may just add to that, and the sanctions, is that I think sometimes one has to be careful of what they wish for. The United States has used its power on the dollar and its power on the political system to either impose sanctions or to ostracize some countries from trading in dollars, etc. So obviously that is going to lead to other countries finding other ways and other means of engaging with the political economy, with the global economy, as it were. And this is what we are witnessing now. It's not necessarily replacing what is there, but it's adding other sources, other ways of doing things. Also, the sanctions against whether it is Iran or Russia does give implications for countries in the MENA that this could also be used against us in the future. We have to take into consideration the NOPEC law. We have to take into consideration the sanctions against Russian oil, and stopping Iran also supplying oil, and sanctions against Iran. And also, the United States using its power to kind of the dollar power to kind of manipulate the global political system. So obviously, these countries are hedging their bets for that, to make sure that they have other avenues, they have other ways of dealing with this. And we are now seeing that the world is not just the United States and Western Europe. The world is much larger than that, and the trade and the economy is actually moving eastward as well, and China and India and even Russia, obviously now it's involved in this really unnecessary war, but it could be again potential. You have to take into consideration that when these MENA countries join BRICS, we are going to be talking about having something like 80% of oil production is going to be within this organization. That itself is a very, very important thing to take into consideration. What would this mean to existing regional integration, regional projects like the Arab League, the Gulf Cooperation Council? Is a really kind of a searching question. First of all, we have to understand that the Arab League has been not as effective as people have mentioned. Some people would go to add that it's been on its deathbed for a very, very long time. The Gulf Cooperation Council is one of the most promising regional integration projects within the Middle East. It has a lot of potential. It's between countries that are more compatible in terms of political systems, in terms of their economies, in terms of culture and identity, etc., etc. However, that was regional integration projects are not necessarily a smooth thing, as the Europeans have found out in the past. It's plagued with issues, with problems, and obstacles and so on. And that is something that we also witnessed in the Gulf Cooperation Council. We've seen the blockade of a member state, Qatar. We've seen now rivalries between Saudi Arabia and the UAE for economic competition, but also geopolitical consideration we can take into that. And the GCC as a regional organization is not functioning as it was supposed to be, or it was hoped to be, because the ambitions were much larger than the achievements that it has achieved, despite the fact, and not underestimating what has been achieved, but it's still not far enough, and not as it's not as good as what people have achieved in the region. So it will function. These organizations will function at a slow pace. They will have their own issues, their own problems. They will have stop and go, and they will have their crises and internal crises. This is also quite common in other regional organizations. I don't think BRICS and the membership of BRICS, to answer directly your question, does pose a challenge to them. I think it opens the market. It opens the space for member state countries in whether it is Egypt, which is in the Arab League, to be part of a larger market. It also will open the market for both the UAE and Saudi Arabia to engage, and it's not necessarily harmful to the regional organization. There are two different sets of bodies. The GCC is a much it's planned to be a much deeper organization with structures and rules and agreements, while the BRICS is still a much looser kind of arrangement. Yes, it's opening up the market. It's benefiting. Members will benefit from the wider, larger market, and maybe investment and finance and know-how and technology. but it's not as structured as the GCC or the Arab League, and it doesn't have the same kind of motivation and ambitions of regional integration. It's not a regional integration project. These are kind of mostly global organizations that are aimed to balance trade, as it were, and balance the geopolitical and geoeconomic settings of how the world is managed. So I don't see there is a challenge.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdullah. So if I can sum up your intervention with Alexandre's intervention, we're basically heading towards a new political and economic architecture or landscape where we will have more balance and more voice and a more central role provided to the global South. So it's like the multipolarity, which is the name of
Absolutely.
of the center that Alexandre is heading, and I would encourage the audience to check it out because they have very interesting articles on this very important topic. I'd like us now to move, and here I just want to remind the audience that if you have any questions to Alexandre and Abdullah, we will move to the Q&A in like maybe 10-15 minutes. So please feel free to ask any questions you have on the comments in the bar chart, and then I'll ask them to Abdullah and Alexandre. I'd like us now to move to to focus specifically on the existing members of the BRICS alliance, specifically China and India, and the implications of the expansion of the alliance on the region. So we've been witnessing a great competition between rising global powers in the MENA region. A lot has been said about China's growing role in the region, and recently India announced a new trade corridor that links India to the Middle East and to Europe. So here, Alexandre, my question is, what do you think are the consequences of a BRICS plus alliance in this wider context? Are we witnessing competing projects in the region, like between China's Road and Belt Initiative that you mentioned earlier in the discussion and India's trade corridor, or are we talking about complementary projects? What's your view on this?
Thank you, Nur. Well, I think my answer would be that competition is good, generally speaking, when it comes to the economy and to developing infrastructures and other projects. I think the more there are investors, and the more there are parties willing to connect the dots between the different countries in the Middle East, in South Asia, Europe, Africa, and between all these regions, I think the better it will be for all these powers and all these economies, because the connectivity will increase, and the opportunities also to trade and to develop joint initiative and develop new products and services. I think all of this will benefit all these counterparties, and will benefit especially the MENA region and the Middle East, which is at the center of all these initiatives. When the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, announced the Vision 2030 initiative, one of the pillars of that initiative was to make the Middle East the kind of hub connecting the three continents between Asia, Europe, and Africa. And I think this is really what it is about now. And this is also what I mentioned in the book I published in 2019 on the MENA region in a multipolar world, in which I imagined there could be this so-called new spice roads. We have the Silk Road, which morphed into this Belt and Road initiative, but we could also have the spice roads, If you remember, historically speaking, the Middle East was connected to Eastern Africa and to Southeastern Asia through the networks of merchants that went from the Arabian Peninsula down to the islands of the Pacific, of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. So this is something that could be revived with all these initiatives and give it a more technological flavor as well, because we are talking about underwater or undersea cables connecting the different digital economies, speeding up internet and other connectivity devices. And this is, I think, this will be good for the Mina region and for its partner as well. So no, I don't see it as competing, but rather as complementary initiatives. Maybe the BRICS Plus grouping could add some layer of normalization to avoid unnecessary, interference between different projects, or to try to come up with some kind of order and guidelines that would be, shared by all these different investors, whether they come from the US, from India, from China, or from elsewhere.
Thank you, Alexandre. And I'd like to I'd like us to keep talking about this. Abdullah, I'd like to hear your own views on this. What does the expansion of the BRICS group mean in terms of China's expanding role in the MENA region? And do you agree with Alexandre that we're talking about complementary projects, not competing ones?
Yeah, I think it's a two-caravan way, in a way that they are competing, but they also complement each other. We are seeing so many projects happening now, whether it is, of course, the expansion of Quad. We are seeing the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. We are seeing north-south corridor as well. We've seen China-Pakistan corridor. I think this is, and many others, I can go on, but I think this is all kind of leads to what Alexandre is saying, that the world is becoming much more interconnected, and these boundaries, geographies are going to change. Where people will have will make it easier for people to interact and trade and exchange goods, services, and ideas. And this is the future of the world. Yet, because of the advent of technology that is helping to speed up this process. Yet there are a lot of competing projects on one hand, but they're not necessarily opposite to each other. I think they do complement each other, and we could see in the future that some of these projects can incorporate between themselves. I think they do help each other, even if that is not it was inadvertently help each other, even if that was not meant to be in the first place. So the more connected world that we are going to be seeing, whether it is digital world or it is physical world, I think this is going to be beneficial for humanity. We all live in this planet, and we all want to live together and trade and exchange ideas and exchange goods and services and so on. So I think I see them as complementing each other. I think the Belt and Road initiative is a very important initiative that is going to link Asia, of course China, but other Asian countries with the Middle East and Africa and Europe and even beyond, perhaps. Whether it's the spice trade or the digital Silk Road as well, as people are talking about, or the spice route, all of these things are taking place more or less at the same time. But we also have to take a dose of reality. I think there are a number of these projects, almost a limitless number of projects like that initiatives, and we have to take a dose of reality when we are talking about them. And that is that not necessarily all of them are going to be successful. These kind of projects require, first and foremost, political will, but also economic and financial investments, and there are no resistance and so on by other powers. So some of these initiatives, although they look good on paper and they look very interesting when they are announced, I think they are going to face some challenges. For example, the North-South, linking Russia and India and even the Middle East project has been on for a long time, but nothing has happened. Because again, of conflict in Azerbaijan is one example where political conflict has obstructed that. So we live in a world where there are lots of political conflicts and so on. The India, Middle East, Europe is again dependent whether the Arab countries are normalizing with Israel, and Israel is going to give the Palestinian their rights and their the right to have their homeland and the two-state solution that has been called for, of course, by the United Nations Security Council. All of these things are going to be problematic, and unless these are solved, I think there is going to be issues. I mean, there are, of course, Iran, Saudi Arabia normalization is a welcome move, but to what extent this is going to happen? Is it just something to de-escalate the conflict, or is it going to move to the second position of being, of moving into a much more cooperative relationship? And there is a big difference between just de-escalating and conflicts and cooperating. So I think it will require a different kind of thinking and a different kind of approach to these initiatives. So yes, while some of these initiatives are welcome, some of them might see the light, I don't think we should, and I think BRICS, of course, membership is one that is positive, because that it is important. It's a global organization, and many countries want to be part of that. Even within BRICS, there are conflicts, as we know. Between China and India, there is competition between them. Does India want to expand as well? Yeah. So there are lots of issues, and in general, I will end up by saying that I think there is potential for some of these projects to happen, but I think that we have to take consideration all the geopolitical, economic consideration, cultural consideration.
Thank you. Thank you, Abdullah. So there's actually a question from the audience, just specifically on your last point about the rivalry between China and India, and sometimes like the conflicting interests within the BRICS alliance. So the question from Jamila Rizwan, and then I'll move to Bruce's question. Jamila is asking, how will the BRICS cooperation be affected by China and India's rivalry, because India has been playing a neutral role between the West and South. I don't know if Abdullah, because you alluded to that, you would like to take take a stab at this, or Alexander?
I'm happy if you want me to go, if Alexander allow me. I think from what we hear, that India was not very excited about inviting new members, and especially Iran, while Russia and to a certain extent China were pushing for that. So there is internal disagreement between the member states within within BRICS. But I think, a lot of negotiations have taken place that BRICS has to expand. It cannot continue as it is. As you know, Iran has joined the Shanghai agreement, and it's now part of that. And Russia wants to kind of compensate Iran for the help it offers in the Ukraine war. So there were, pressures from both China and Iran and Russia to include Iran. I think Brazil was again a country that has its own misgivings about certain members, whether it's Argentina, and they have their own problems there, but also Brazil wants to push for more climate change measures to be taken into BRICS, while China and India are not necessarily happy with that, and they want more oil and gas, as it were. So they want more oil and gas producing countries into the organization, while Brazil is against that. So there are some intricacies that one can talk about within the organizations. I said, the interests are not necessarily compatible, but I think they have made the overall interest of the organization in the future of to overrule all of these differences, to ensure that this organization actually lives up to its expectation to be as a voice for the global South, to offer an alternative way of doing things, just not just relying on what Alexander has alluded to earlier, the post World War II organization, the Bretton Woods, and the control of the IMF and the WTO and all these organizations that actually was born from the Bretton Woods system or the World Bank. So I think they at the end, they made the overall objective overrule some of these differences. And they, as you can see, they picked and choose the country that can add more value immediately to the organization, because there were a lot of other member states or other states that want to be member of the organization, but they did not choose them all in the first instance. And I think maybe that's something that's going to come in the future, and we will see these kind of conflicts between them maybe playing again in the future to stop some countries joining or not joining, or stop some project. But at the moment, India-China competition is very important, and the two countries have their own way of looking at this. I mean, China trying to compete with the United States, while India wants to work with the United States as well. So here is another way of looking at it. But I think at the end of the day, they managed to reconcile their differences, and they have invited these countries in the first round to join.
Thank you, Abdullah. There are actually several questions one can ask about the conflicting interests, or whether there are contradictions or complementarity among the different projects by the different countries. But I want to move to a question by Bruce Stanley. So I'm going to read it as it is. So he's asking, did the discussions in South Africa include any ethical norms or discourse held up as standards for interaction, or was realism and national interests exclusive? So maybe Alexandre, you can answer this one. Did they talk about ethical norms, or was it like a very realist discourse about national and strategic interests?
Thank you. No, I think it all depends about what you put behind these words and these concepts, such as ethical norms. Because actually, yes, there is a kind of discourse that has been developing within the BRICS summits, and especially now that it has been much wider extended to the global south, and to you know, try to mirror the different points of view and worldviews of different countries in this global south. Whether the concept of global south is well chosen or not, I think it's another debate, but we use it for convenience, you know. But at the end of the day, historically, these countries have focused on a few points that are important to them. Respect for their sovereignty. I think this is one of the key cornerstones of all this, you know, cooperation, especially from the Chinese point of view, but also from the Indian or Russian point of view. There is also this idea of trying to put in place a global system that would be more fair for the countries from the global south, and that would actually not be dominated by a single global hegemonic power or a few powers. So there is this idea of, if you want, justice at the global level, and a system that would be, you know, put the responsibilities and the weight of the proof, so to say, on the countries that contributed mostly to create the problems, rather than the countries that actually came up later, that gained their independence, and that find themselves, you know, struck in a system that they did not really contributed to shape after World War II. So there is this Bandung spirit, so to say, from the 1955, you know, Bandung Conference, that sometimes we find now in the BRICS grouping, but it has also been rejuvenated with more pragmatic and more practical, you know, focus on developing investment, business. So the ideological part of it, I think this is something that is still there, because obviously you cannot move it aside, and ideology and politics will always be there, and will always be a driver for much of what the world is about. But I think the idea is to try to accommodate different countries with different political systems, and not to try to impose some kind of rules. We have seen in the past that whenever one nation tried to impose its system of ethics or of political views and regime and so on other countries, usually it failed and backfired. We have seen that repeatedly with the United States, in Iraq, in different you know, instances of crisis, and so I think from the Chinese perspective, at least, the idea is more to focus on finding a common ground between different countries, different political systems, without trying to impose some norms that go beyond what these countries are ready to assume.
If I may, Nur, just very quickly, just to add to what Alexander has nicely put in, I think I would just add that although the norms were not clear, I think it's embedded within the objectives of the organization, i.e., you know, for a much involvement of the global south, and for change in the management of the global system, and you know, trying to kind of challenge the hegemony that they see from, you know, Western organization, Western system. So it's not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily put in. I think the discussions were mere realpolitik, but I think it is embedded within the objectives of the organization and the overall view of what this organization and this cooperation means. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, thank you, Abdullah, and thank you, Alexandre, for a very fascinating discussion. There are so many other questions to be asked, to be honest. It's a huge topic, worth of a PhD. But unfortunately, we're running out of time because we have 40 seconds left. So I don't want my Carnegie colleague to be upset. So I'm just going to conclude. Again, thank you so much, Abdullah and Alexandre, for this very insightful discussion. I want to thank anyone who joined us virtually on StreamYard or YouTube or any other social media link. I hope this was an enriching discussion to the audience. We tried to discuss several topics related to the BRICS Plus Alliance and their expansion. We discussed the motivations behind the choice of BRICS members to expand outward, the strategic interests that MENA countries bring to the expanded BRICS group. And we also talked about the reasons or the motivations that drove some countries in the MENA region to become part of BRICS and to deepen their engagement with the alliance. We also talked about, specifically with Alexandre, the monetary and currency implications of the BRICS and how we are actually moving towards more a world of monetary multipolarity. BRICS will mainly be an impetus to reform global institutions. So we're not really talking about establishing alternative institutions, but it's about reshaping and reforming and challenging existing Western-centric institutions. And we also talked about the complementarity of some of the projects, and we discussed how they might have conflicting goals, but at the end of the day, they will hopefully have a positive influence on the MENA region in a world that we are heading towards, that will be characterized by a new international order and definitely more interconnectivity. So thank you so much again, Abdullah and Alexandre. We ran out of time. We are having another webinar next week on how to move beyond debt and austerity, just ahead of the Marrakesh meetings that are being held by the international financial institutions. So I hope the audience will also join us next Wednesday, the 4th of October at 10 a.m. DC time, 5 p.m. Beirut time. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of the day or like a wonderful evening, depending on your time zone. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you, Abdullah.